The weather's getting chillier, and so's the temperature around Husker Nation. This is Evan Bland with the Pick Six Podcast. We have Tom Shatel, Sam McKewon. We're with the Omaha World-Herald, and striking more of a somber tone this week, gentlemen. And
the team did.
Yes, we have to strike a commiserate tone.
I didn't think they were any different than they usually are. The players don't usually say anything. I mean, they don't usually come in there high-fiving or anything. I thought, Don Rael was usually the same every week. I thought he was fine. Isaac Gifford was not in the mood to talk, and he gave short answers, and we got our ass kicked. We're pissed off, and I've had it happen before, and so we'll bounce back, and so he was not in the mood to talk, but yet he gave the best answers. I didn't sense the mood was, and I don't care about the mood because the mood on Tuesday doesn't mean you're going to play well on Saturday. So, it's great to show a bunch of anger and emotion at the press conference, but and then don't go out and get your butt kicked again. So I'd rather see it on the field. So and as would Husker fans. So anyway.
Well, let's rewind it a little bit. So Nebraska loses 56-7 at Indiana. Typically, on these pick sixes that we do, we tend to look ahead at what's next. This seems like a week we probably need to dwell a little bit on what happened. And so, just real basically, where did this come from? This has to be one of the more surprising Nebraska results I can think of in recent memory in terms of how it played out. How did this happen?
Well, first of all, let me say to all of our audience out there, and I hear from people all the time who listen, which is great. Thank you. Keep it up. This is still a good football team. It had a very, very bad day. Still a good team. It's still the same team. It won 5 games. Now, they've got to ratchet it up because they're not playing those teams anymore. They're playing teams that are better. Where do they come from? If only we knew. I think they hadn't been hit in the mouth like that. Colorado didn't do it. Illinois played well, but Indiana was good. They wanted to destroy anybody. They would have tried to do that to Alabama. But this was a game for them on the national stage. It was a prove-it game for their coach. I was watching it on TV at the end of the game. He's up by 40. He was like he still wants to kill somebody. He was miserable. His face was like he was down 40. And that's the kind of deal that they ran into. So, people want to hear this, but this is year 2, right? The goal was to go to a bowl game and find out about them grow this year. Grow. Well, will that be a growing moment? They found out that when they got hit in the mouth, they don't hit back, and that got to change. To me, the news of the press conferences was the coordinators. Players don't really give you much or show you much. If they do, it's a bonus. The coordinators, this is a team that suddenly maybe lacks confidence. Certainly didn't have confidence last week. The coordinators did not inspire confidence yesterday in any shape or fashion. Tony White took he called himself stupid, which I think the interesting thing about this game last week is that it kind of unmasked a lot of things. Like, these guys are heroes. These guys have all the answers. There's a certain magic in Matt Rule. There's the magic in the process is you're going to fall down and you're going to learn. It isn't going to be Kurt Signetti where you're just going to steamroll everything because you've loaded up and you have all this momentum. So what do we learn? Well, the Tony White isn't always a smart guy, and he owned up to it. And this is what we did. And I don't know why he decided to leave certain defenders out on the island where there was not help as far as tackling, but he did. Smarter than me on that. I wouldn't know, but But then, Marcus Satterfield got up there and just inspired the opposite of any confidence that he knows what to do or he knows how to get this thing fixed. He just did not offer that impression. So I had to be reminded to run the ball. Well, then that disqualifies him from being an offensive coordinator right there. So, and he's done some good things. But then the give and take with Kevin Schutz about the yards per play thing was very revealing too. I mean, and that's fine. I want to kill him for that, but it did not inspire the fact that he's got his thumb on everything and he knows how to fix this. That was my impression. So, okay, what was the question again?
That was the question.
Yeah, where did it all come from? Where did it all come from?
Evan, can you, because you wrote about it today, can you just recap the yards per play discussion? Not all people are on Twitter who saw that.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was toward the end of Satterfield's regular availability, and as you mentioned, Kevin Schutz from 10-11 asked him
sincerely.
Just generally, what would you like your offense's average yards per play to be? And he didn't really know, and he said 4 to 6 yards, somewhere in there. And then he was told that Nebraska is at like 5.6, which is mid 80s nationally. He didn't really know what the national leader was, and the part that was not caught on the video at the end is someone said, Miami leads the country at just above 8 yards per play, and he said, well, then I guess bump up what I said to 6 to 8 yards to have it a little bit more. So it was uncomfortable. It was a little odd. I have that exact quote, and I was going to get your guys' reaction later, but we can talk about it right now. He was asked about the conventional run game additionally, and said it's a lot on me. I have to commit to it. I've got to make sure I get back to getting in the mindset of you have to, in order to win in this league, establish the run game. Through the bye week and this past week, we're going to work toward getting back to that for sure. So it was that, and it was the yards per play. Those were the things that definitely stood out from that.
Sam, what we can't figure out, and I don't know if we can certainly ask Rule tomorrow. I don't know if he'll answer it or not, but are he and Satterfield on the same page on this? Because Rule from day one is, I'm an offensive line guy. I'm a physical guy. I want to create this kind of culture. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to get the tough yards. I want all this stuff, and that's what he wants to build. And Satterfield just seems to be doing something else.
Right.
And so, are they on the same page?
I think we can ask him that question. It's a good question to ask, and I think he will say that they are. Whether or not everything is going the way that Matt Rule wants it to is probably not something he'll disclose to us. But after the game on Saturday, there were conversations about how we thought Dylan played. How did Rule think he played? And he made the comment that he thought it would be good for Dylan to go through that scenario where he has to throw the ball a lot and work through it. And then on Monday, he didn't necessarily go away from that commentary. I thought he kind of reiterated that, whether that's coming from Satterfield or that's coming from Rule. I think it's kind of one and the same. Certainly, Rule could have gone out and paid $1.4 million for a coordinator who had spent, had more experience or different kinds of experiences. But I think he wanted to work with a guy that he knew, a guy that could run the offense that he ultimately wants to run. I think the challenge with running the offense that they're trying to run, there's two. One of the challenges is your quarterback is not going to give you any rushing yards. He's not. He's not going to scramble. He scrambled for, I think, 1 first down all year, right? So, I think your quarterback is not going to give you 30 or 40 rushing yards a game. 1. 2, and this comment comes from James Franklin years ago when Mike Riley came to Nebraska, and they were struggling with the offense a little bit, and they were going to move away from Tommy Armstrong, who graduated, to Tanner Lee, right? And so I went and James Franklin had done a little bit of that with Christian Hackenberg, but then he went to Trace McSorley, who could run. And I remember going to Franklin who was pissed off because Jim Harbaugh was talking and loud. But anyway, we had a good dialogue about what do you do with an offense like this? You used to have this offense with Christian Hackenberg. What do you do? And he gave a very detailed answer. He's like, you really, he's like, when I was with the Packers, we had the offensive line and we had the tight ends. He's like, you have to have the offensive line. You have to have the tight ends. You got to have good receivers. You got to have good backs. He said it's a great offense if you have all the pieces. And he knows what he's talking about. He's a great offensive mind. He's been a coordinator for a long time. I don't think Nebraska has all the pieces to do the things that they want to do around Dylan Raiola if Raiola never runs. And so the offense they're trying to run is a hard offense to run unless you have all of it. And they try to throw the ball to the side, and the guys don't block. They try to run the football, and the holes aren't large enough. I think those are probably the main issues. Now, when you ask where this all came from, I think to some degree, I think some of it came from, Evan, just what Tom said. They got surprised early. Indiana was probably better than they thought. Whether they won't admit that, but I think they were. They hadn't seen Indiana. Indiana was, whoa, these guys are making plays, and they didn't respond. And then, in my opinion, I don't know this for sure, what I think Tony White is referring to are blitzes that he called that didn't work because the guys didn't execute them the right way, and he is doing what I think Rule wants him to do, which is say it's his fault. I don't think it is his fault, but I understand why he would say that.
Right.
He called the rush touchdown right before the first half was over, and we're like, holy crap, what are they doing? It was a 7-man run blitz, and they just didn't execute it. And so he ran through this big hole because two guys ran into the same gap, and then Deshaun Singleton's, on a tilt-a-whirl. And I'm sure Tony White is like, I feel bad that I called a play that my players couldn't execute. That's damning with faint praise. I need to call things that, we can do. In a way, that's a criticism, but it's a way of taking the responsibility on himself. So I think I don't think all is right down there right now. I really don't.
Well, let me ask you. You mentioned the yards per play thing, and Sam, can you put in perspective how central or not central that particular stat is? Because I think of it from a baseball perspective. Like if you ask a coach, what's the batting average your team wants to have? Maybe they're not even thinking about that. They're thinking about on-base percentage and other numbers. So do you think it's possible that there are other numbers that are more central to what Nebraska's trying to do? Yards per point, I know, is one that you look at. How central is that particular stat?
I want to be really charitable to Satterfield here and say that when he was asked that question, what was probably turning in his mind was, what? That's probably not a stat they look at. Then I think what he was thinking about was success rate. Now, success rate is you get 4 yards on first down, you're in 3rd and 2 on second down or on third down. Success rate is you stay on schedule, and staying on schedule is probably 4 yards a play.
Right.
No team averages 4 yards a play except for Kennesaw State, which is the worst team in Division A. They're moving up, right? They're the only team that's the truth. So if you average it all out, a good number for yards per play is about 7. Nebraska hasn't averaged 7 in a long time. I'm guessing they don't use yards per play as a measurement. We can ask Rule about that. My guess is they use success rate. And then I use yards per point, which is if you gain, what you want to do is gain 100 yards and be able to score 7 points off of that. So 400 yards equals 28 points. So the proper number for that is 14. 14 times 7 is 98. Anything above 14 is 14 to 15 isn't great. Anything above 15 is not great. Anything below 14 and you're really good. So I don't know what numbers they use. I do think it was a telling moment, though, because he used the phrase, "You've stumped me." And that's, I think he's just trying to do the best he can to take accountability for what he can take accountability for and not throw that quarterback under the bus. And you can't, because he's a true freshman. If Dylan Raiola were a senior, there are things he did in that game that a senior can't do. But a 19-year-old true freshman has to be given a maximum amount of grace.
I agree. And I think the way Satterfield answered the question, I think, Evan, was he kind of didn't know what he was talking about. He was kind of surprised by, well, I don't know. It was like, I don't know what that, or he was almost like, I don't know what that is, or I don't know. It didn't come off well, but like Sam said, maybe they don't use that. You know me, I'm Mr. Analytics. I didn't know what it was either. Here's what I want. Here's what I think is the issue right now, and it's not yards per play. It's, are you putting somebody on their butt? Yeah. Are you taking somebody and planting them into the ground every single play? And that goes to receivers on the edge and people up front. Are you winning the one-on-one battles? That is football. It ain't yards per play. It ain't any of that stuff. Nebraska, that's what I think needs to be going on right now, is running a system to get that mentality in every single game, every single play. A lot of people thought that they quit last week. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. First of all, I wasn't there. Second of all, you can't see into somebody's head or heart and know that they quit. But they clearly were not focused. They clearly did not fight back. But I thought the play calling did that too. I think you went away from the run game way too quickly in that game. And they had success running the ball early. And I think just because you're down 14-7, I thought they kind of panicked saying, all right, I guess our defense isn't going to be here today. We got take off the gloves, throw away the plan. We're going to start throwing it because that's our best chance. And I still thought their best chance was to keep the game the way they wanted it and establish superiority up front and take it into the third or fourth quarter. You may be down 7 or whatever, but you're still in it. You're winding the clock. That was a gamble that they took. It was a gamble Tony White took by the blitzing. Okay, we're not going to play straight up. We're going to go after these guys and try and make them uncomfortable. And it's a gamble, and it didn't work. So, again, people want to hear this. And I'm probably, I used to be the guy trying to incite the riots, not calm everybody down. But it's year 2, and it's a bad game, and they might have another one this week. But they're trying to learn right now. And Dylan Raiola is doing well, but he's learning too.
But it feels to me, Tom, like the year 2 talk rings less hollow, especially against a team like Indiana, where you look across the way and you say, this is a first-year coach who's got his team 7-0, and the way that you're talking about Nebraska wanting to play, it seemed like Indiana played that way. Like they had receivers who were running precision routes and catching back shoulder fades and running explosive run plays and being disruptive defensively. Like they did all the things in a third of the time that Nebraska is still trying to do. And so it really feels like not only did Nebraska not do it, but they got it shoved in their face by a team that's resetting, that has no tradition of doing it at the football level, doing it against them on national TV.
I agree, and that's why I wrote urgency. There doesn't seem to be sitting back a little bit, relying too much on we're building, a construction zone, please stay away. No, you're absolutely right. They need to show more urgency. There needs to be, and let that be the lesson from this game. That, okay, yeah, it's a big boy football now. This isn't Baylor, apologies to Baylor or Temple. This is Baylor's beaten Nebraska. Baylor's won the Big 12. Baylor has been to big bowl games. But the expectations here are much different than Baylor. And so people don't accept, they accept building. That's when they hired them, that's what they got. That's what they said they wanted. But deep down, Husker fans were also impatient. And so, I heard some guy say, well, why didn't we hire, Signetti? I said, do you imagine if Trev Alberts 2 years ago would have hired a guy from James Madison who was going to bring in 22 transfers, and most of them were from James Madison or from Ohio U? What, all of us would have looked at him like, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? You can't bring that guy to Nebraska. And those players, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So, it is what it is. But they're building, but build a little faster, and that's fair. Play like every game means something, and so I hope it was a slap in the face to get that going. Okay, call better plays. get this thing going. Get those guys blocking on the edge. It doesn't take 2 years to do that. It doesn't take 2 years to have special teams do something besides go backwards and make mistakes. It doesn't take. They were better on special teams last year, weren't they? I mean, they didn't do a lot of this stuff, did they?
They were better on special teams.
Man, they regressed. Didn't they block a couple kicks? I mean, I don't remember everything, but they've gone backwards there. I think this is a time to evaluate the coaching staff, and I think, which is very fair. I mean, we just saw Brent Venables dump his offensive coordinator. Well, he's in year 3, and he's in the SEC, man, and the game has changed. He's saving his butt. We're not getting it done, and so he threw his guy overboard. Same with Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Big 12 now. When we were the favorites, we're not going to win unless we get things changed. I do not expect Matt Rule to make a change during the season. He said that last year, and I do not think he will. But after the season, I think everything has to be on the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all good thoughts. One of the central challenges they have, and so they went into last December thinking to themselves, we're going to go get a fifth-year senior quarterback. We're going to go get a guy who can throw the football and manage the team and lead this team. We're going to go get some old receivers. We're going to go get a new running back, maybe a new lineman. And Dylan Raiola changed that conversation by committing to Nebraska. I mean, Kyle McCord wasn't going to come here and without a guarantee of a starting job. And so he wasn't going to get that if Dylan came here. And so one of the challenges, and again, I think Raiola has a chance to be an incredibly good college quarterback. But one of the challenges that comes along with it is that if he had gone to Georgia or Ohio State, he wasn't going to – well, he might have played at Ohio State, but he wasn't going to play at Georgia right away. He was going to redshirt because they have a guy who's a fifth-year senior. And they're not going to bench him because Georgia's trying to win the national championship. But here he was going to play, and you just have to live through some of the growing pains that you're seeing. Part of the challenges with Dylan, though, is his growing pains are, not throwing a ball when it seems to be open, not pulling the trigger because he's worried about making turnovers and taking sacks. With a lot of young freshman quarterbacks, it's like, well, he's probably going to make a boneheaded play, but we're going to get 3 spectacular plays from him just running around and throwing it downfield, and he's going to create a Tommy Armstrong kind of YOLO play. Dylan doesn't do that. He's not that kind of quarterback. And so, again, you have to surround him with really, really good players, and you have to expect him to take time to grow. And the problem is I just don't think Nebraska has quite good enough players to make all the pieces work the way it worked for Zach Taylor. Zach Taylor was a stationary quarterback when he was at Nebraska. But, he had Maurice Purify, and he had Marlon Lucky, and he had Brandon Jackson, and he had Franz Hardy, and he had better football players around him. And so part of the challenge is Nebraska has to try to manufacture an offense without using a quarterback run game that they don't have. They can either insert Heinrich Haarberg, and they got to take Dylan off the field if they do that, though. They can't say this, Dylan's out here, and he's not going to do anything on this play. But
on the
Heinrich,
edge.
no, you got to take him off the field. So if they want to put Heinrich in, they can do it, but they got to take Dylan off the field. Or they've got to find a way to run the football without Dylan running, because that's not what he's going to do. So there's a core central issue there. And then I think you have this same thing on the defense that's been there, Evan, for as long as we've been covering it the last 10 years, which is when things go bad, and this goes all the way back to the Bo era. Nebraska's up 17-3 at Wisconsin in 2014. Everything's going right. Melvin Gordon breaks one run, and everybody's like, here we go. And then they gave up like 9,000 yards rushing. They're up 17-3, and it falls apart. That can't happen. But it's been happening at Nebraska for like 15 years. So that part is something that that's endemic. And they've got to find a way to get rid of that, because you can't let 2 or 3 bad plays ruin you. And it feels like that happens to the defense. On offense, they have to find a way to get to 21 or 24 every game, and it's gonna take their absolute best effort. And I'd go to those receivers and go, guys, it's going to take everything you have. This is not – I'm sorry, you're not at Texas anymore. I'm sorry, you're not in the ACC anymore where they don't want to play defense. everybody's going to play defense. You have to play absolutely as good as possible. Like, there's no choice. And if they get that kind of effort game in and game out, I think they'll be okay. But they didn't get that against Indiana. Those guys just didn't play very well.
How much does the margin factor into this discussion for you guys? Because Matt Rule talked about it on Monday too, this idea that, maybe in hindsight when they were down 28-7 and they're at Indiana's 13, if you kick that, you're still down 3 scores. It's not great gamesmanship in the moment, but maybe they lose that game 35-10 instead of 56-7. Like, does the way that it unraveled affect how you perceive what happened and what should happen in the future?
Yes, and I believe that's why the fans are so pissed. Matt Rule was hired to do away with these kind of games where you look helpless, you're just getting destroyed, and the fact that Indiana did it, it just added to it. Yeah, absolutely, it matters. People would still be upset if they lose. Sure, they would be, but I mean, the fact that the second half was just a laugher, and it was over, and Indiana could name the score. That's not what anybody why anybody was hired. That's not why no. See, I absolutely believe that, and again, I think they have a good enough run game to keep doing it, and you may have to punt a couple times, but I think it's good enough that it's Indiana's defense where you could have established something there. And I guess, again, I'm not certainly the opposite of an offensive genius, but a play action pass have got guys who can go deep, run the ball, play action. I just like to see something established where there's an identity. And if you're gonna search every week, if you're gonna try to figure out what works and what doesn't, then they may not win another game. I don't know. I mean, they should beat UCLA, but they've got to establish something in the second half of the season and play hard, play physical, and get some kind of identity going. Again, I'm not getting that vibe from the press conferences this week of that kind of confidence in that. So, but we will see.
Did you have another thought on that, Sam? You looked contemplative.
About the 28-7 versus 28-10 thing?
Yeah, and just the margin of the outcome.
I could talk about it for an hour, but I won't. I'll just leave it at this, that I understand what he's saying. I understand kind of what he's talking about. I will read what I tweeted yesterday because I think that's probably the easiest way to go. Or a couple days ago. Ultimately, I mean this kindly, it doesn't matter, but you could also chew on the decision for a long time because you just don't know what Indiana's response would be with a backup QB if Indiana has to go 75 yards instead of 12.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Indiana goes 3 and out and punts. That's possible. If it's 28-10, you never know. On the flip side of the coin, I think Rule is trying to prepare his team for the day when scoring touchdowns is an imperative to win the biggest games, and field goals are merely cosmetic. It's an NFL way of looking at things, and it has not paid off yet at Nebraska. Perhaps the costliest result so far was the third down interception versus Maryland. Protect the field goal there at all costs and make Maryland's offense tie it. The pressure on Maryland's game-ending field goal, you remember that, would have been much greater if it were to tie. Rule's decisions and Satterfield's play calling sometimes seem pointed to a day when Nebraska's default setting isn't, welp, time for the wheels to fall off. He wants to get them to a point where when they fall behind by 17 points, it's screw it, we're still going to go out there and play football, okay? That day, I don't know if that day is going to necessarily come this year, and I don't know if Dylan Raiola is going to be Jordan Love by the time he leaves school. I don't know. What I would say, and I'll make this as a college baseball comparison, the crap that you do in college baseball, and I don't mean crap as a mean way, the things you do in college baseball, the bunting and the hitting and the running and the whatever, that works in college because they're not Major League Baseball players.
Yeah. That's
you
right.
can't assume, well, we're just going to hit home runs like they do in the majors because any of the little things that we would do don't work. That's not true. You can put pressure on a college pitcher and he won't respond. You can make a third baseman in college feel the same thing over and over and he won't make the right throw. It's not the NFL. And so, like, the idea that, like, well, you know, the game score and the analytics, you got to push that aside. The other thing I would say is that, like, there's this whole thing of stoicism in coaching today, and I kind of get it. Every game's the same as every other game. We have to have sort of a no-mind mindset, flush everything back here, focus on the now, every little play. We heard it from a couple of the players yesterday. Well, it doesn't, you know, what can we do? And I don't really believe in stoicism. So, like, I don't really believe in the idea that 35-17 is the same as 56-7. I don't think they are. And I think there does come a point where you're like, you have to be careful about what you're telling your team about the margin of score. You just got to be careful about it. And, like, you can't just assume, well, it's a loss. It would have been a loss if it were 7-6. And I think he said that. And I'm like, but they're not the same kind of loss. They're not. And so, like, I think there's things there. He's trying to teach them to play a certain way and to keep competing regardless of the score. And I think sometimes kids from 18 to 23, just the emotions get in the way. All right, long answer.
No.
I apologize for that. But,
Not at all.
you know, there's a lot of things that I think they're trying to work through.
So here, that sets up kind of maybe the last football question for this segment. They go to Ohio State this week. It's a top 5 team. That's a team that's been stewing for a couple weeks now over their own loss to Oregon. Should Nebraska approach Ohio State any differently given what just happened? In other words, is it the top priority to not get embarrassed this week and have this thing really snowball?
You mean from a scheme and a play calling, or the players?
From the internal operations. Should Nebraska's top priority, or right up there, be don't get embarrassed?
Yeah. Here's what you do. Whatever Indiana's doing, you do that. And that is what Nebraska used to do, which is show up every week. Whether it's, you know, back then, the bottom of the Big 8 or the top of the Big 8. You know, yes, you that's part of the problem right now. It's I've seen this team when it cared a lot. It's Colorado, first half of Colorado. I've seen that team. I like that team. Everybody likes that team. That team needs to be there every game, every single game. It's just what you do. It's how we play. It's how we do our business. We, as the, you know, I'm pretending I'm in the locker room. I'm not actually part of the team, but we, you know, it's what Nebraska does. It's how they play football. That's what they're trying to do right now. Indiana did it like that because they have that kind of coach. He's Nick Saban Jr., and there's not many guys like that. Yeah, it makes me wonder, you know, where's he been all this time? Because he could have been at some other job in the Big Ten or SEC doing a hell of a deal, but he's been building slowly. Maybe he learned a lot. Maybe that's what Nebraska's doing now. Evan, just come out and play hard and play like you're trying to win the game. Matt Rule thought he was doing that last week by throwing the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a disagreement on, but I think he thought he was doing that. But it isn't just play calling. It's, are you tackling? Are you blocking? Are you putting a guy on his butt every single play? That's what I mean, and that's what they've got to get that into. And you know, I don't see practices. They say that they go at each other and that they call it Bloody Tuesday and all that stuff. We don't always see that during the games, though. So, yeah, there's a disconnect between what they say they want to do sometimes and what they actually do. So that seems to be needs to be a bridge from that to that, because we don't always see what they're telling us during the week. So.
What do you think, Sam?
I think they can, Evan. I think they can play a style of football that doesn't get them embarrassed. You know, they can run the football, and it also aligns with the goals that they have for the rest of the season, which establish an identity, run the football. play hard-nosed defense without having to get gimmicky blitzes. And then the special teams piece is be crisp on special teams. Everything's got to be as good as it can possibly be. And I think you can do those three things and not forsake winning games and also play a style of football that doesn't get you embarrassed. I understand, again, where Tony White's coming from. Like, I probably shouldn't have called those blitzes. I get that. I appreciate him saying that. He didn't actually say what the schematic mistakes were, but I suspect that's what it was. And I totally understand that. There's a comment that Tom made about Cignetti and this whole, where has he been? I don't know exactly, but what I can kind of sense is that Curt Cignetti is not necessarily the most whatever coach in terms of like smooth talking, PJ Fleckin guy. Like, you can tell he's probably not easy to deal with. You can tell that he's sort of dismissive. You can tell he's more of an old school coach. And if we're going to be honest, there's a lot of ADs today that don't want that. ADs today want somebody that is like can almost be an AD. They want a telegenic, personable,
right,
can go on TV shows and give great answers. And Curt Cignetti got so tired of talking about his team in a positive way last week that he finally just said, "Google me, I win." Now, it worked, right? I mean, it worked for him. But if they had lost the game, then he would have been, "Oh, look at this Curt," it becomes that. So I think Curt Cignetti's probably a pretty darn good coach that just didn't fit like the modern AD's framework. What I would say is that there's a lot of things about Matt Rule that are old school, but there's also some new school things that I think ADs appreciate, and he's very popular, and he goes on the shows, and he sounds good and all the rest, but it comes down to blocking and tackling and doing all those things, and Indiana just appears to be quite ahead. Indiana has no pressure on it. Indiana just plays football. They go to practice every day. I don't know if Indiana has 19 cameras around doing documentary series on them. One thing I would do, chasing 3 cameras out. Buy social media for about 3 weeks. Guys, you can go. We're done with that. We could beat Ohio State and great. We don't need a video on it. The marketing season is over. Signing day is on December 4th.
Amen.
Get that stuff out of there.
Amen.
We don't need. I don't know who it's for.
Yeah.
I guess it's for the recruits.
Yeah.
It's certainly not for us.
The fans.
We have written. Yeah, I guess. I mean, the fans, but the fans just want wins. And so when the season begins, like, I get it. You want to have an off-season marketing program and a spring league, and that's all good. And again, all of that stuff is fine. I'm not trying to be overly critical of it because I understand the value of it as it relates to recruiting. But, okay. Like, you don't need – I mean, you just got to be 56-7. Nobody needs to be running around doing one-on-one interviews with people about whatever. Like, if you can't talk after the game after you got beat pretty badly, then just call it square and say, you know what, it's okay. We're going to take the cameras out for a week. We might even turn off the music, and we might just practice football. I don't know if they're at that stage. Sooner or later, a lot of teams get to it. Scott Frost's team got to it, remember? Mm-hmm. They finally turned the music off.
They did.
And he picked the wrong time to kick his team's ass. In 2019, you remember, they didn't play well at Minnesota. It was cold. And he did that the whole week. And, it's not going to be cold. And then he came back and he kicked his team's butt after they lost to Indiana, remember?
Wearing hoodies.
They practiced outside all day, and everybody was cold, and people were pissed off. And then they went to Purdue, and they didn't play well. So, you got to time that stuff right. But there does come a point. Oh, and it's true.
Yeah.
JD Spiel, it's all, I mean, it happened. You got to time it right. But, there does come a point where it's like, guys, you know what? We're not going to be Nebraska, the football marketing program. We're just going to play football, and that's all we're going to do. We're going to get the cameras out of here. He did it during. We're going to get the ex-players out of here, the boosters out of here. We're just going to play football. And maybe Ohio State week is that week. Maybe it's UCLA week. I don't know. If they go and lose to Ohio State by 28 or 35 points, then it's going to get really real. Because then everybody's like, oh, we got to beat UCLA. Oh, my God.
Tightens up, yep.
Oh, yeah. See, this is like one of those weeks where it's like, well, it's pretty rough. And, but maybe you go out to Ohio State and you shock everybody and you play really well and you lose by 4. But if you go out there and you lose by 35, then all of a sudden, okay, guys, now we're going to tighten the chin straps and no more screwing around. We got to win games now. And we'll just see what happens. I think they're kind of laying a little bit low this week because they know that if they hammer them before they play Ohio State, then Ohio State comes out and says, Jeremiah Smith, 14-0. we're just really good, it doesn't help anybody. So
Right.
I think they're trying to be thoughtful this week. But next week, I think it's going to be real if they don't play well at Ohio State.
Quick Nebraska basketball topic we can discuss on exhibition Sunday.
Does anybody care at this point?
I don't, but maybe you do.
No, I mean, I think that's part of the question is it just feels
Yeah.
like the season's about to begin, and it just feels very quiet.
Yeah, Grand Valley State. How's that grab you guys? I mean, what are you looking for at this point? Like,
Who's going to play? What roles are they going to play? Who can shoot? Who can rebound? Who can defend? Yeah, all those things. Just it's the age of the portal. You meet new people every year, and you try to figure out who they are. So, yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm trying to figure out the football thing, and
that's front of mind for sure.
I mean, it's still October. I'm not ready for these basketball games yet. They didn't used to happen until Thanksgiving, and now it's like you almost play a whole month before Thanksgiving.
most people couldn't. So they play Grand Valley State on Sunday, and then they play Rio Grand Valley for their season opener. So,
Grand Valley two-step, yeah.
and then, so here's what I'll say is that, and I'm not trying to tick Nebraska fans off when I say this. When I say Creighton basketball, I know the teams Creighton's playing in the non-conference, and I'm thinking, well, like Kansas, Alabama, like elite teams. Nebraska's not playing any of those teams. So Nebraska is choosing the we're going to win a bunch of games. We're going to try to get a bunch of routes so that we can help our NET rating before we get to Big Ten play. So it's almost like Nebraska's basketball season, outside of a game against St. Mary's in Sioux Falls, it really doesn't begin until they play Creighton, which is on November 22nd.
And I'm okay with that because they aren't where Creighton is. They're not close to that. They're still trying to build that program resume of being in the tournament every year and being at least get on the NCAA bubble every year, and so I think this team is going to get to the NCAA bubble, but they have to learn how to win. They have to figure out who's going to play and who's not going to play and what everybody can do. As is Creighton. Creighton is doing that too, but they're doing it against KU and Alabama. They might play Alabama twice, but their program is equipped to handle that schedule. Yeah,
Nebraska's. And they don't really play anybody until they play Nebraska, but it's different because there's the teams after they play Nebraska.
Oh, absolutely. But I say Nebraska, I'm okay, but because they're still building a program where expect to win every year. I think the wins help their confidence, and there's plenty of great games in the Big Ten. There's plenty of those games that are going to make your resume in the Big Ten. I don't think you have to overdo the schedule when you're in Nebraska. But would it be nice to have a couple games? Yeah, sure it would be. I'd like to see them. Again, I've said I think they should play in Omaha every year. I think they should get a good non-conference game and play it in Omaha when they're not playing Creighton. Because they don't have much of a presence in Omaha. They never have. Because they've never tried. And I think that they should try. There's a lot of fans here. There's a lot of money here. And they have kind of said, okay, Creighton, go ahead and Creighton's done a great job of taking over the city. Nebraska's never tried. So, yeah, there's an opportunity for them to play somebody, I think, in the years they're going to play Creighton, play downtown, bring in an opponent and do it for the fans here. So, but yeah, I'd like to see who's going to make three-pointers. How about that? I'll go with that. Who's going to shoot? Fred always has shooters, and he always has makers. Who are the makers going to be?
Yes, I think this is the natural ramp-up that Nebraska needs. It's worked for them last year. They didn't play much of a non-con. They developed that chemistry, that confidence, got some wins, so that by the time they got to the Big Ten, maybe the sun was a little bit they were greater than the sum of their parts in a lot of ways. So I think with the new team, you start building that confidence now. By the time you get to Creighton, maybe they have some of that figured out.
How about volleyball being number 1 overall in the NCAA early seeding release? I thought that was they do that in college basketball, where the basketball committee releases if the tournament started today, here's how we see it, and they do that now in the volleyball tournament, and Nebraska was the overall number 1 seed. So
that Lincoln Regional would have been loaded. You see that hypothetical? It had Texas in there. And Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I think which would have been a rematch of last year's NCAA Final Four semifinal, Wisconsin, Texas. I watched Pittsburgh this week on TV, and they're very, very good. Nebraska beat them last year in the Final Four, and I think Nebraska's played a tougher schedule than Pitt. Pittsburgh's, I don't know who's going to get in the Final Four, but whoever's in there is going to be the best Final Four ever, because the top 6 teams, including Creighton, are all national title caliber.
Best offense in terms of volleyball that I can remember in a long time. It's very rare to hit over 300 right now. Nebraska leads. Very few teams do that every season. Certainly not a team that plays as hard of a schedule as Nebraska does that. So, as far as basketball is concerned, everything Tom said, including the stuff about for sure. They just Amari Bynum committed to Ohio State. The Omaha Bryan star, who's now at Link Academy, is going to Ohio State. That kid is free to pick wherever he wants to go. Congrats to him. He's a very fine player. It's yet another student athlete from the Omaha area, including 4 transfers who went to USC, UCLA, Michigan State, and Wisconsin, that being John Tanji, who have chosen not to go to Nebraska, but gone somewhere else. And Nebraska, I think, would have taken 2 of the 4 transfers I just mentioned, and they would have taken Bynum. And they are I'm just being honest, they're turning down money at Nebraska to go to places that are probably giving them less money. I don't know what that is. I don't know why it's happening, but it's just odd to me. There's no way that kid's going to have a better role at Ohio State than he would at Nebraska.
Yeah,
it's just not. So I don't know what the whole story is, but again, it's worth a conversation once Bynum signs. We can ask Hoiberg about it again. Should we go to picks?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Evan had a better week. Well, no, it tightened actually a little bit.
You got one on me.
Yeah, I got one on you, and then I think Tom was right there as well. Okay, so let's go. Missouri at Alabama.
Oh, Bama. Missouri hasn't been very good. They had to get the hero out of the hospital last week to save him. Against Auburn's not very good. So, but things are bad in Bama. So that could go either way. If the good Missouri we expected this year shows up, then I can be trouble for Bama. I'll take Bama.
Bama for all those reasons.
Alabama. Kansas at Kansas State.
K-State.
Yep, K-State.
I'll take K-State as well. I look forward to a good game, though. Notre Dame at Navy.
Ooh.
Well, I'm sorry. It's not at Navy. It is in Philadelphia, I believe, or Baltimore. So there'll be Notre Dame fans there.
I'm going to take Navy.
I think it'll be a good game. Notre Dame.
I'll take Notre Dame as well. Navy is the better of the two, in my opinion, of the Service Academy teams in terms of the teams they beat. Army is ranked higher. Illinois at Oregon. Pretty easy one, I think, right? Oregon?
Yeah, Oregon.
Duck.
I do greatly appreciate the work that Illinois is doing, though. And they don't have that much talent on offense at all. But they're getting it done. Penn State at Wisconsin.
Ooh.
Wisconsin on a 3-game winning streak. Penn State still undefeated.
I'm going to take Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
I think Penn State, maybe by multiple scores.
There you go.
Penn State for me. LSU at A&M. I've switched my opinion on A&M. I am taking A&M At home, Trev Albert's new school.
Got to mention him.
Yep.
I'm going to go A&M as well. At Kyle Field.
I'm going with the Bayou Bengals.
They have a better quarterback for sure.
Brian Kelly.
Michigan State, Michigan. This game is at the Big House. I don't know.
A lot more of a toss-up now than it would have been a month ago.
Sure was. I'll take Michigan.
Still got to go Michigan, too.
To do something different, I'm going to go Sparty. Ooh. I think it's possible. Michigan can't score. And their fans, as we all know, that's a wine and cheese crowd. They don't care. They'll go home.
And then Sparty gets Indiana after that. At home.
Northwestern at Iowa. Is Iowa going to rebound after losing?
Yes, Iowa up and down.
Iowa at home.
Iowa at home. That's exactly. Iowa at home.
Iowa for me as well. Maryland at Missouri. I'm sorry, Missouri. Minnesota. Maryland at Minnesota.
Oh, I'll go Minnesota.
Yep, it's a time zone game. I mean, it's really like in the Big Ten, like the home games matter more than they ever have. I'm going Minnesota.
Minnesota for me too. And the last one, point spread, is 25.5 right now as we speak. Nebraska and Ohio State. Point spread.
So it's either cover or beat, or what are we talking about here?
So either Ohio State wins by 26 or 25 or less. Fewer.
I'll go over 25.
I think that's an honest answer.
I'm going to go just under. Oh. I think
okay.
Ohio State wins by like 24 or 25.
Yeah, I'm going to go Ohio State. And it could end up being 41-14, and it's a respectable 41-14, if that makes any sense. But I think Ohio State's gonna be out for revenge after losing to Oregon. All right, that's it.
All right, thanks for listening, guys. Nebraska to Ohio State this weekend. Who knows? Maybe it's 2018, and maybe it's not. We'll find out this weekend. Thanks for listening. For Tom and Sam, I'm Evan. This is the Pick Six Podcast.